it's Jackie here from the Early Years Learning Hub. And before we get started, I wanted to let you know about our subscription option. If you're a fan of our podcasts and would like to see us continue to bring you interesting speakers on all of the topics you didn't even know you needed to hear about, as well as accessing some really great resources to help you put some of the ideas from the podcast into practice, then why not subscribe? It is great value at just $2.99 plus GST per month and is automatically debited from your bank account. Simply go to our website, Early Years Learning Hub, and click on the subscribe button. Welcome to another Early Years Learning Hub podcast. My name is Jackie Ward and I'm the founder and managing director of the Early Years Learning Hub. This is one of our episodes unpacking theory and research, and where I invite academics and experts in a particular area show how the theory, research and contemporary understandings influence our work as teachers, educators and leaders. Today I'm joined by Dr Zali Yager, International Body Image Expert and Co-Executive Director of the Embrace Collective. Zali, would you like to tell our listeners a little bit about yourself, your professional journey and the Embrace Collective?
Sure. It's so lovely to be here. Thank you so much for having me on. My professional journey, I think journey is a very good word for it, because I, from a very early age, wanted to be a teacher and an educator. I must say from like my earliest years, it was mostly motivated by being able to decorate the classroom, because I just thought that would be the most fun thing. I used to see the teachers like stapling things onto the walls and just think I could go nuts here. But I eventually studied health and physical education, and I was really focused on my own experience of schooling was that I got out of a lot of PE and I was able to avoid learning how to throw and catch a ball. Don't throw anything at me at the moment because I'm still very uncoordinated, but I kind of thought someone's got to be able to do this better than what I received when I went through school. So I went in to become a health and PE teacher, but over time just got very interested in the concept of body image, or how people feel about the way they look, and what we could do in the school setting to ensure that young people grow up feeling really good in their bodies and not worrying about the way that they look, so that they can go off and do other cool and important things in the world. So as I was going through my teacher education, really focused in on that, and someone said to me, "You should do a PhD." And I said, I don't know what that is. So when they said that it was the chance to just learn about something that you're really interested in for 4 years, I was like, yes, that's exactly what I want to do next. I did my PhD on personal professional education, like the intersection of how personal and professional education might need to happen for people who are becoming health and PE teachers, and then spent a long time in teacher education in universities, because even though I started off wanting to teach very small children, I ended up much more suited to teaching the people who are going to become the teachers and university students. Along the way, doing all of my research in the space of body image, really just focused on finding out what works to help people feel better about their bodies, what programs could we create, doing all of the research that could, really, I just thought there was a puzzle there that could be unpacked. But once I had my own kids, so this is, my eldest is 13 and I have 10-year-old twin girls. Once I had my children, I realized we were doing all of this research in universities, not telling anybody any of the things that we knew that could actually be quite practical and that could actually change the way that we teach, or the way that we parent our kids, or the way that we, speak to young people about their bodies in particular. So I started the Embrace Collective, which is a health promotion charity that aims to translate all of the best science and research into creative, engaging, innovative tools that people around young people can use in all of the places where young people live, learn and play. And the idea is to equip those people around young people to be able to create really positive environments so that young people can grow up feeling happy and healthy and confident in their bodies. So along that journey, I met up with Taryn Brumfitt, who is the other co-executive director of the Embrace Collective, and she created the Embrace film, and then she made Embrace Kids as her second film, which I was the sort of expert advisor on. And then she became Australian of the Year and everything exploded. And we got very, very busy overnight. But it was amazing for the national conversation around bodies in Australia, and just being able to move a lot of things forward in terms of just how we could use the latest research to do things differently.
Wow, that's a great journey, and what a story. I was enthralled. And I couldn't agree more that so much of what we do is influenced by how we, as women, I think, I'm not sure if men really worry about this, I couldn't do that because of, I might look this or that or whatever. Yeah. So I think it's such an important thing, and I am so happy to have you on the podcast as well, because I think it's, again, a relatively, not a new issue, but a new issue in our, that's come across our sort of field of view kind of thing. So really timely, I think, for us to start talking about it, because you're going to talk about some of the statistics of how young these things happen. So thank you for sharing your journey, and thank you for starting the Embrace Collective. Exciting. So let's start off with understanding the impact of body image on young children. So why is it so important for teachers to understand what are some of the statistics on the impact and how young children are when they first become aware of this? And can you give us sort of like an overview of the key issues in the space?
I guess the more research that is done, the more people find out that actually body image, the way people feel about their appearance, is related to pretty much every other physical health behavior, mental health outcome. Like, it just connects to so many things. And, like, even when I was saying about young people, like, don't care about your body so you can go out and do cool things. It's like, we know that if people are dissatisfied with their bodies, they won't put up their hand in class. They won't step up for a leadership position. Like, there are so many things that our kind of insecurities might hold us back from. And so that's why it is so important to get this right for young people. And when I talk about body image, a lot of people imagine teenagers, and particularly teenage girls. And, to your point before, this is something that boys and men experience. They experience pressure around their appearance. There are, like, in inverted commas, ideals for a male body that may or may not be even possible to achieve. However, the pressure is definitely stronger for girls and women, and all of the research shows that more girls and women are dissatisfied with their appearance. But I think even though we picture teenagers, and that peak vulnerability for body dissatisfaction and eating disorders does happen in adolescence, it's 13, 14 years of age, when their bodies are changing, and they have sort of developmental capabilities to be able to compare themselves to others and all of that sort of thing. But all of the foundations for that time are literally laid in childhood. And in all of those early experiences of all of the things that young people pick up around what is the ideal body, what are bodies for, how do we value our bodies, where does our worth come from, like all of those sorts of questions, children are soaking up messages about those things from zero. And so when we started talking about this in early childhood, people are like, no, that's a high school teacher's problem. And it is probably a high school teacher's problem. It's now become a primary school teacher's problem in terms of eating disorders have doubled in children aged 5 to 9. So that's a really young age to start developing, a full-blown eating disorder. But what we're talking about with early childhood educators is that all of the foundations for the risk factors and the protective factors that contribute to the way young people feel about their bodies generally just come up in the small moments and the tiny interactions that happen so many times in the early childhood setting. And if we can start to become a little bit more aware about how we talk about, particularly talking about bodies and how we talk about food, we can really change how that presents in adolescence by building those protective factors early.
Zali, can I jump in there? I'm thinking so many guests I've had on this podcast, we talk about, like, for example, maths, and very young children or arts will go, I either am an artist or I am, good at this or I'm good at that. That's all part of our learning outcome number one, sense of identity, knowing yourself and what you can and can't do. And, I think if we relate it to that, children develop those ideas about that sort of thing really early. So why wouldn't they do the same thing about body image and what they look like? And, they're constantly looking without the ability to critically analyse, I think. They're constantly comparing themselves with others. It's only as you get older that you can be a bit more critical about that and a little bit more sort of existential. But when you're little, it's just black and white and you're looking, well, that person can do that and I can't kind of thing,
Mm.
So, yeah, that's really interesting that you say that. And again, I think it's, great for our audience to hear that. It's a really relevant and topical issue, sorry. All this body image talk. I'm like,
Yeah.
so back to you. Sorry, you've got more to share with us. Thanks.
Oh, I've got so much more to say. So, in terms of the age at which this really does start to not become an issue, but become apparent, I guess we could say. I was doing some research. I was one of the people doing data collection, and Professor Susan Paxton was leading the study. It was Emma Spiel's work. And we were doing play-based interviews with 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds, and 5-year-olds. So some of these 3-year-olds could barely put a sentence together. But throughout the course of these interviews, and they would just very clearly be answering questions that really indicated they had a very clear sense that already that, like, in inverted commas, thin is good and fat is bad. And they just had this very concrete, rigid kind of knowledge of that already. So, we would be reading part of the interview there was a story we would be reading, and it's, a child knocked over mummy's favourite vase. Which child was that? And then we had these pictures of children and they were sort of in increasingly larger bodies. Even from the age of 3, they would say the child in the larger body knocked over the vase. The child in the larger body has no friends. The child in the larger body, it was associated with all of the negative things, and the child in the smaller body or the thinner body was sort of associated with positive characteristics and traits. So I just think it was amazing that at such a young age they could already point this out. And so they must be pulling in all of those messages from the media that they watch and are exposed to, from the things that adults are saying around them. It's so young to have that already in place.
Yeah, very similar to that research around racism too, and how children automatically assume darker skin is bad and lighter skin is good, even if for children who have darker skin. Yeah, interesting, because people would never think that of very little children, would they? They wouldn't think they were capable of having those discriminations. But yeah, very interesting and impactful. Awesome. So is there anything else that you would like to share with us before we move on to the next?
I guess what that leads to then is, if you have that very early understanding or that very early conceptual, this is good, that is bad, then as children grow up and they start to be able to have the developmental capacity to compare their body to others, and they start to realise that they are in the bad category, or their body is larger than, that's when we start to see some really strong body dissatisfaction, body shame, and then all of the other messages that they've picked up along the way about food, in terms of, this is where the layer of the kind of healthy eating education comes in. If they have picked up a lot of those messages, they can start to apply those concepts in a way that is then disordered and quite problematic for their mental and physical health. So that's kind of how that plays out, I guess, from that very early understanding. And, this is something that I think comes up so often in the early childhood setting, because children are eating 3, 4, 5 times a day sometimes. Like, it feels like that's all you do is like sit around and eat a snack, and then it's like clear that up.
A lot of eating.
And once it's clean, it's like lunchtimes. It's something that comes up mostly because it's like that's what you're doing. It comes up in play when kids are in the pretend kitchen cooking things, and how educators respond to that. And it comes up in a lot of stories and media as well, where there are opportunities to be able to just weave in some really protective messaging. So this is something that I think early childhood educators don't think is within their role, but there is so many opportunities to just get in and start early and lay those foundations with the positive outcomes in mind.
Well, that is really interesting information and statistics. I hope our audience has taken on board some of that. So I don't know if we've already covered this, but also I just wanted to sort of, the underlying issue, talk about the underlying issue of body shaming. You've kind of talked a little bit about it, but how does this present in, say, families, but also in the classroom? Like, are we doing things that we don't even realise, as parents or as educators, that could be detrimental?
Yeah, I think actually we've sort of called it body shaming recently, but I guess in the olden days, like when I was young, it would have been like teasing, or we would have called it like maybe bullying around appearance. And when we imagine those things, we imagine kind of like the extreme situation of, you know, someone with, I don't know, it always involves like a locker and someone holding someone up against a locker yelling something at them or something, you know, it's like quite extreme. But I think if we travel down the continuum a little bit, one of the things that is really an important contributor to the way children start to develop an understanding of their own bodies, other people's bodies, is body commentary. And so it's the things like anything that adults are saying about their own bodies, about other people's bodies. And that can be positive and negative. And people assume positive things like, you look great, have you lost weight? People assume that that is a compliment or a positive thing. But when you sort of unpack that, the underlying message there is that being thinner or smaller or losing weight is a really good thing.
It's great.
And and you know, that's not necessarily the message that we want kids to be picking up on. So although there are like the negative, you know, there's sort of extreme end of body shaming of, you know, someone saying horrible things about someone's weight or their appearance, it is also the things that people think are benign or the things people think are harmless that do actually contribute as well. So we always talk about, you know, if every grown-up was just going to do one thing, it would be to say less things about bodies. That's your own body, other people's bodies. So every time something, and we're visual beings, so, you know, sometimes things just pop into our head to comment or to have some sort of judgment or critique or criticism or even compliments and positive things. Those things pop into our head, and I think we just need to remember to introduce the layer of like, we don't really know how people are going to interpret that and pick up on that, particularly if there are younger people around. So I always talk about like a sort of a pool analogy, like if we're all swimming in a pool and everyone is putting one less negative or critical comment about bodies into the pool, it's going to be a nicer place for everyone to swim in, and it's going to be a better place for young people to kind of feel positive and more just deeper feelings about themselves, so they're not judging their own worth based on their appearance, they're judging it based on who they are and what they're doing in the world.
Oh, that's a really good point. And it's very similar, if I think about it, to the notion of eradicating things like good boy or good girl, you know, like that gender stereotyping and things like that, you know, or commenting on, you know, girls', you know, outfits or whatever compared to, you might comment on a boy's block structure, or, you know what I mean? Like, it's just that extra layer of thinking about, do I need to say all of those things, which, you know, educators have been eradicating those sorts of phrases for a long time. So, yeah, it's just another thing to think about. I love that. Awesome. All right, so focusing in on health education. So I think this is a real tricky one, and I've, you know, because I've actually I've delivered a lot of the health Munch and Move professional learning over the years, and in New South Wales, that's the, you know, healthy eating, healthy lifestyles kind of program, and it kind of is very, very didactic and very specific about being really proactive in talking about healthy eating. But I think, you know, there's sort of, I don't know if it always translates to the messages that we want children to receive. So I was interested to sort of, you know, how do we do that in a way, you know, how do we focus in on healthy eating and healthy lifestyles? And because we do want children to learn about those things, it is important, you know, and for me, I think about in my preschool class, I do want children to learn an understanding of, you know, how to be critical about, you know, the food, the health of something that they're putting into their body, as much as I want them to learn and understand about maths and symmetry. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think of it as I want them to learn sort of a broad range of understandings about their world. But also I realise it's tricky because particularly for little people, we talked a lot about this already, they're very black and white and they're very concrete. And so they do tend to go, oh, this food is good and this food is bad. So, you know, they haven't developed, you know, that moral reasoning around, you know, well, there's nuances to this is on the healthier end of things, you know, and I do try, you know, with my children, my group, to talk about, you know, really digging a bit deeper into thinking about what makes it healthy and what doesn't, you know, fat content, sugar content, salt and all those things, and what are the implications of that. But there's, you know, so much that a 3 or a 4-year-old could understand around that concept. So I'm really interested in what your thoughts are on like what the focus should be, and maybe I'm kind of going down a rabbit warren that's a little too deep, as I tend to. So what are your thoughts on this, and how does the program address some of these ideas?
Yeah, I think if we zoom out a little bit and just remember kind of the context and the journey that we've all travelled through, for the past 20 years, or even 40 years, health promotion and a lot of health messaging has been based on this idea that we should make people feel bad about whatever it is they're doing in order to try and motivate them to do better, basically. And, you know, if you're old enough to remember, like, Norm on the couch, like, this is classic
Norm.
kind of shame-based marketing, right? And for a long time, that was the focus. And then, you know, in the past 10 to 20 years, that kind of approach where it was really like, it sort of got louder and louder in terms of the level of like criticism and shame that was in that messaging, that's what got all of the funding. And so that has been really directly passed down to early childhood services like for a long time. I think what we have now is a whole lot of new science and research that shows that actually that's not going to work. When we make people feel bad about what they're eating, and when we make people feel bad about their bodies and their weight, in particular, when things are really based around weight, then it actually leads to a whole bunch of negative psychological and health outcomes. So we know that if people feel bad about their bodies, they're more likely to avoid physical activity, and they're more likely to like not eat a wide range of fruits and vegetables. So so what we're seeing now is a big shift away from the approaches that we might have used in the past, because the research is showing us that there is a new way. And it's not to make us feel bad about the things that we were, or, you know, that we might have been saying in the past. It's just now that we know more, we can do things differently in a way that might be more effective. So I think we're seeing this shift towards a more inclusive approach. We're seeing a shift just away from weight-centric approaches towards, some people are calling it size inclusive health promotion, some people are calling it weight inclusive or body inclusive. We haven't kind of nailed what the word is yet for the approach, but it's definitely neutral in terms of weight, and actually just focusing more on health again. Like, it's like we were talking about things to do to be healthy in order to improve to change your weight in order to improve your health. And it's like, we don't need that bit in the middle. We can just talk about the things that we can do to improve our health, because that's going to make us healthy, regardless of what our body might or might not weigh at the time. I think that's kind of the big shift that's happening. And so programs like Munch and Move are slowly evolving over time. And some of the health promotion officers that I talked to were telling me, oh, I have to go back into this service where I told them to do this thing, and now I'm telling them that they shouldn't say that anymore, and that they should do this other thing. And so there are a lot of changes, and there's a lot of things to get used to, but overall I think it does feel a lot better. And what we're moving away from is just any sort of critique and judgment of food and bodies. Is just, whenever we notice that, that's kind of in the past. And what we're moving towards is just creating more, environments, just like with the good girl and the not commenting on the outfits because of the gender environment. It's just creating a space where everyone can feel good about themselves. One of the big shifts, though, that I wanted to focus on in particular in terms of healthy eating, and this is a culmination of a lot of work internationally, Canada, US, also a lot of great work in Australia, is that in terms of food and nutrition education, in early childhood, there's been this specific work around developmental appropriateness of nutrition education. And in early childhood, it's just not developmentally appropriate to talk about nutrition. So we don't need to talk about, the benefits of this or that, or carrots and eyesight, because when we try to boil the complex, nuanced information down to something that's at a 3-year-old level, it does turn into good and bad and this and that. So I think the focus is, you don't need to teach about nutrition, which a lot of educators are like, oh my God, I don't have to do that. Don't have to teach about nutrition. But it's your job to create early experiences around food. And that can be so many things. It can be, where does food come from? What is crunchy and what is soft, and what does it smell like? And it doesn't have to be about whether this or that nutrient is in that food and going into your bones. It's like, we get to focus on all the other cool stuff, which I think is way more fun and exciting anyway.
Definitely. That's interesting. I love that. And again, yeah, I kind of did go down that warrant rabbit hole because if you start talking about, if you try and unpack and you break down that, trying to get rid of the good and bad thing, yeah, it's too complex for them to grasp. I mean, don't get me wrong, I have worked with some very clever 4 and 5 year olds who did grasp a lot of those concepts, but as a general rule, it's still, when they extrapolate it back though to, if you think about, you've talked about that maybe in a group experience and then it comes back to their own lunch boxes, then I can see that there's still that sort of difficulty in applying and transferring, adapting that information to another context. Because again, that's not developmentally appropriate. It's too tricky for them to do that. So good tip. But I do also love the idea of just focusing in on exploring foods and experiences and whatnot, because that is something that tends not to happen at home, and particularly if you've got a fussy eater. They're not as open to exploring different tastes and sensations at home. So we do have, I guess, like a lot of things, we have the privilege to do that with children in our early childhood environments, which is great. Awesome. Yeah. All right, well, let's move on to our next point, which is teachers making a big difference and the power of and impact that we can have, which I always think is a nice thing to remember about our work. It is such important work because we do work with little people and we shape and mould them throughout their lives. So I think, I guess one of the things that I wanted to talk about, I guess, is our personal thing, because I know that it's hit me hard many moons ago. Parent, I was in the kitchen, I was cooking or something. I had my back to my daughter and I don't know if I said something or whatever, but she was, I don't know, she might have been about 8 and she said something to me, "Why did you do X, Y and Z, Mum?" And I was like, I felt like already, obviously, I knew that children were picking up everything from around them, but I'm like, how? She couldn't even see my face. So it wasn't a facial expression, it wasn't this and that. It was so, like, I just thought to myself, you just don't realise all the things that, you have an influence without realising it. So I wanted to talk about that one because we do talk a lot to our colleagues, particularly in early childhood, not so much in the school space because you might be on your own with the children, but you still talk about stories about yourself. So I want to sort of think about those things that we say about our own life and our own bodies and our own lifestyle that we may be having that sort of, I guess, unintended sort of impact. What sort of things would you sort of talk to us about those influences and what we can do about them?
Yeah, it's such a huge influence. And this just comes back to that concept of body commentary and the things that we are saying. And often in Australia, we have a tendency to, make jokes about ourselves in sort of a humorous way, but it's like self-deprecating humour. So there's often a tendency to sort of, be role-playing in the play kitchen and a child makes a mud cake and it's like, oh, I couldn't possibly eat that. I need to fit into my swimmers for the holiday I'm going on or something, and it's just, and we say it for the benefit of sort of the other adults in the room that we know will sort of get it. And it's like, it can be something that is light and lighthearted and not intended to be harmful at all. But when we think about the messages that children might be taking away from that, it's like, oh, that means I can't eat cake, or like we just don't know what they're internalizing from those sorts of experiences. So anything where we're talking about our own bodies, someone else's body, but also if we're talking about food in a kind of restrictive way to change bodies, or like what the impact of eating food on our bodies in terms of particularly body size, some of those things is what we hope to move away from. And those are conversations that are so common among women in particular, but also, I had this experience when I was going to a play group with my children, and we'd all just had babies, so all of our bodies had just changed so much. And then everyone was talking about the gym or the Pilates or the whatever, and then I just looked around and I thought, our kids can understand this. Like, we had 3-year-olds, we had twins in the mix, and I just thought they're picking up on all of these conversations already, even though we don't want them to. So I think it's just that little bit of awareness of just trying to say less about our own bodies. And because the power of the teachers, and huge, immense power in so many ways, just being the one person that might believe in a child and their ability, or, that you might have such a strong connection, you understand them on so many levels, but that how to role model just feeling good in your body, or even not worrying about your body, is a really important influence in kids' lives, particularly when we had the research that sort of shows that at home, if parents might be dieting, restricting, and more concerned about their bodies, that does pass on to the kids. So then you could be the person in their life who is like, no, our bodies are strong. And you could be the one reframing, instead of what your body looks like, talking about what your body does for you. So like, I love how strong my arms are because that means I can reach up to the high parts of this tree. Or I love how strong my legs are because that means I get to, dance on the, in the floor with all of the kids. So really, I call it the Red Riding Hood approach of like, how the wolf always says, all the better to see you with about the eyes and all the better to hear you with the ears. If you start saying something that might be negative about your body, like my stomach, feels big today, and then it's like you can turn that into a big bad wolf moment and just be like, and that means I'm so cuddly and squishy to be able to have this hug with you if it's your own child. Or it's like, how do we turn this into what your body does instead of just always on how it looks?
The image. I love that. And also, I'm going to say, sideline benefit for you, you actually stop focusing in and have a better body image yourself then, don't you?
Yeah. They can never get grown-ups to do something for themselves, especially mothers, but this is one thing where it has a subtle benefit on them, because the more you say that, the more you might actually believe it and start to value yourself on the things
on other levels. What a world we'd live in if we weren't so obsessed with body image. Love it, love it, love it, love it. All right, well, that is awesome, because that draws us to the end of you guys. So one of the reasons why I was really keen to have you on is because you have some great, amazing and free resources. So to support our listeners to engage with these concepts and develop, lessons and learning experiences and all that sort of stuff. So can you tell us a little bit about what you have and where we can get them from, Zali?
So we've translated all of this science and all of the, I can talk for hours on this. We've pulled all of that into the Body Blocks suite of resources. So we called it Body Blocks because of the really foundational impact that happens in early childhood and in early learning settings. And it's about those building blocks to really get started on being protective so early on. So we have professional learning modules that are 5 minutes max, and there's 7 of them. So the idea was you can just watch it quickly and then you can walk back onto the floor and you can do something differently from that quick video. And Amelia Mosley from Behind the News is the host, so they're like engaging and interesting. And we also have Taran Brumfitt reading her book, Embrace Your Body. There's a song, there's posters, there's a learning experiences. It's basically the complete toolbox to be able to, everything that educators were like, do you have this? We're like, yes, we'll make that too. So it's all in there. And it's everything that you can need to just start to evolve practice around food, bodies, and movement as well. And we haven't talked a lot about movement in this time, but around food, bodies, and movement, just to change the way we talk and some of the ways that we do things. And so if you go to bodyimageresources.com, you can sign up and you'll get sent an email with access to all of those resources. And then it's the sort of thing where, like, if you're like, could you make this other thing though? Just let us know and we will probably do that too. So we love hearing from people who have engaged with the program and the resources. We love hearing about some of the challenges and the things that you wish you had to be able to work on that. So definitely get in touch with the team if you're listening to this and think that there's a need.
Well, that sounds great. Well, I'll put the link to the website in the show notes. I think that's been fascinating and really great to have had you on, Zali, and to hear all about that and why it's so important for early childhood educators. We'll wrap it up there, and I'll just remind our listeners that if they're interested, they can get some extra content if they subscribe, but also to follow us so they don't miss an episode. So thanks again, Zali, and that's bye from us from now.
Thank you.